Good morning. Let me begin by saying something that might surprise you. You are already brainwashed. We all are. By algorithms, by advertising, by habits we didn't choose. The real question is, are you the one doing the brainwashing? Today, I want to show you how to take control of that process, to intentionally rewire your brain for health, clarity, and lasting success. Let's start with a simple truth. Your brain is not fixed. It's constantly changing, adapting, and forming new connections. The scientific term for this is neuroplasticity, and here's the good news: it doesn't just happen to you. You can direct it. So how do we brainwash ourselves? In the best way possible, we begin with the fundamentals. State drives behavior, and behavior wires the brain. If you change your state and choose the right behaviors consistently, you build neural circuits that support the life you want. And here's what most people get wrong. They wait to feel motivated before taking action. But neuroscience shows that action precedes emotion more often than the other way around. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation, doesn't only spike before rewards, it also spikes during effort. That means the very act of leaning into hard things begins to rewire the reward system in your brain. You start to crave challenge. You begin to associate effort with pleasure. That's one of the most powerful forms of self-directed brainwashing. Let's go deeper. Your visual system is tightly linked to your level of alertness. When you're in tunnel visions, scanning a screen, staring at details, you're triggering the near mode of focus. It raises internal arousal. That's great for problem solving. But if you never exit that mode, your nervous system stays in a chronic state of vigilance. So what do you do? Every few hours, engage your panoramic vision. Look out a window. Let your gaze soften. This simple act sends a signal to your brain that you're safe, that you can shift into recovery mode. It balances your stress response and helps avoid burnout. Another crucial layer, breathing. It sounds too simple to be effective, but your breath is a direct handle to your autonomic nervous system. When you're stressed, your exhales get shorter. That signals danger. But if you reverse it, extend your exhales longer than your inhales, you activate the parasympathetic branch, calming your mind and body. Try it now. Inhale for 4, exhale for 8. Repeat. You're not just calming yourself. You're training your brain to stay regulated under pressure. This is how elite performers and special operations teams keep their cool, by mastering their physiology first. Now let's talk about mental time travel, what scientists call episodic future thinking. When you visualize a future scenario vividly and emotionally, the brain doesn't just imagine, it begins to believe. Neural patterns fire as if the event is already happening. This isn't manifesting in a mystical sense. It's preloading neural pathways that make follow-through more likely. The trick: don't just picture the goal, visualize the obstacles too, and rehearse your response. That builds cognitive flexibility and psychological resilience. And finally, social wiring. The brain is a profoundly social organ. Isolation, even at subtle levels, weakens motivation, memory, and even immune function. You want to brainwash yourself for health and success. Surround yourself with people whose nervous systems are aligned with your goals. Their habits, their stress responses, even their vocabulary. These things reprogram your subconscious, whether you notice it or not. Choose wisely. Remember, repetition is the currency of neuroplasticity. You don't need hacks. You need consistency. Small actions, repeated daily under the right conditions, reshape your brain. This is not theoretical. It's observable, testable, and reversible. You can literally build the neural circuits of discipline, confidence, focus, and calm, but not through wishing, through deliberate self-directed behavior. So stop waiting for the right mindset to show up. Start building it from the inside out with your biology on your side. Let's dive even deeper into the architecture of self-reinvention. One of the most overlooked tools in your brainwash toolkit is deliberate discomfort. Not chaos, not trauma, but strategically applied stress that pushes the boundary of what your nervous system can tolerate. For example, high-intensity interval training doesn't just build muscle or burn fat. It sharpens your ability to shift quickly between sympathetic alert and parasympathetic calm states. That flexibility is known as autonomic resilience. It's not just physical, it's mental. People who can shift gears between effort and recovery are more adaptable, more focused, and more emotionally stable under pressure. Now let's talk about repetition with variation. It's not enough to just repeat a habit blindly. The brain learns fastest when there is repetition, yes, but with slight, intentional variation. Take skill, building, whether it's language, music, or public speaking, practicing the same way over and over builds rigidity. But when you add small tweaks, styming, environment, intensity, you engage more of your sensory and motor systems. This makes the learning more durable. You want to change, make the familiar slightly unfamiliar, again and again. That's how the brain stays awake to the process. Equally important, nutrition for neuroplasticity. The foods you eat don't just fuel your body, they directly impact brain function. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fatty fish are crucial for synaptic growth. Amino acids like tyrosine and tryptophan are precursors for dopamine and serotonin. In glucose regulation, keeping your blood sugar stable has a massive impact on cognition, mood, and impulse control. If your brain is inflamed or undernourished, no amount of willpower will work. So yes, your grocery list is a neurobiology tool. Then there's attention management. Attention is the gatekeeper of neuroplastic change. What you focus on intensely and repeatedly grows. But attention is a limited resource. Scrolling, notifications, digital multitasking all dilute your attention muscle, weakening your ability to stay with one thought, one goal, one task. So if you want to rewire your brain, you must train your attention deliberately, set time blocks, use timers, eliminate unnecessary choices. This isn't discipline for the sake of suffering, it's bandwidth protection for the circuits that actually matter. Let's not forget the power of rest cycles. The brain doesn't grow during work. It grows in the rest that follows the work. Sleep is the foundation, yes, but so are micro recoveries, 5-minute walks, light exposure, breath work, or even doing absolutely nothing. These pauses allow your brain to consolidate effort into memory, integrate emotion, and prepare for the next surge. This rhythm, effort, rest, repeat, is the biological signature of sustained high performance. When you ignore it, you flatline, last tracking, you can't rewire what you don't measure. Use a journal, app, or voice memo. Track behaviors, track mood, track recovery, not obsessively, but intentionally. Your brain needs feedback. When it sees progress, even small wins, it releases dopamine in anticipation of future effort. That loop drives momentum, and momentum is the secret weapon of every successful transformation. You're not rewiring for one result. You're building a system, a brain-body system, tuned for clarity, calm, and consistent action. That is the path forward. That is how you brainwash yourself on purpose and for good. When you start to consciously apply these principles, something fascinating begins to happen beneath the surface. Your default mode network, the part of your brain associated with mind wandering, starts to quiet down. This network is most active when you're ruminating, comparing, worrying, when you're in that autopilot spiral of unproductive thought. But when you engage in focused, goal-oriented behavior, especially things like intense work, deep conversation, or creative flow, this network gets suppressed. And over time, with consistent repetition, your baseline mental noise decreases. That's not philosophical, it's measurable, and the result is more clarity, better decision-making, and increased emotional regulation. Let's also touch on movement as a form of mental training. Movement is not just exercise, it's neurochemical modulation. When you engage in intentional physical activity, especially rhythmic movement like walking, running, or cycling, you activate a system called the hippocampal prefrontal circuit. This system enhances memory, spatial awareness, and executive function. That's why a walk can sometimes solve a problem a screen never will. If you're stuck mentally, the solution might not be in thinking harder. It might be in moving more intelligently. Now, consider the value of structured stillness. Most people assume meditation is just about calm, but the deeper value lies in metacognition, your ability to observe thoughts without becoming them. Just 10 minutes a day of focused breath or body awareness can increase gray matter in regions tied to self, control, and emotional regulation. Over time, you gain a buffer between stimulus and response. You stop reacting out of habit. You start choosing out of awareness. That's how you create new pathways, new behaviors, and eventually, a new identity. Speaking of identity, here's a critical truth. Your brain is a prediction machine. It constantly forecasts what will happen next based on past experience. If your internal narrative is full of, "I always fail," or "I can't change," those predictions become self-fulfilling, not because they're true, but because your brain biases toward consistency. So how do you flip the script? Not with affirmations, but with evidence. Give your brain new proof, complete the workout, keep the promise, track the win. Each time you follow through, even on something small, you're planting a new prediction in your nervous system. I can do hard things. I am changing. This is who I am now. Also essential is deliberate exposure to uncertainty. The brain craves control, but growth happens in the unknown. Whether it's learning a new skill, entering a new social environment, or simply disrupting an old pattern, these experiences create what's called prediction error, a signal that forces your brain to update its models. These moments feel uncomfortable, but they're neuroplastic gold. Every time you do something uncertain and survive it, your brain becomes more flexible, more adaptable, more confident. And finally, you must understand the role of environmental cues. Your habits don't exist in isolation. They are embedded in context. Your workspace, your lighting, your social circle, even your phone layout. Rewiring your brain isn't just about internal shifts. It's about engineering your surroundings so that the path of least resistance aligns with the behaviors you want to reinforce. You're not just changing yourself, you're changing the field in which you operate. Every behavior you repeat is a vote for the kind of brain you want to build. And the smallest adjustments often yield the biggest results over time. Not because they're dramatic, but because they're sustainable and scalable. Let's talk about habit stacking, a technique based on the brain's love for predictability and association. When you attach a new desired behavior to an existing routine, like doing breath work right after brushing your teeth, you reduce friction and increase the likelihood of success. The brain begins to link the two tasks neurologically, making the new habit feel automatic over time. This is how you automate discipline, not by force, but by structure. And then there's reward timing. Most people chase external rewards, money, praise, likes on a post. But these are unreliable, often delayed, and largely out of your control. What matters more is internal reward signaling, especially rewarding the effort itself. When you mentally or physically acknowledge the effort right after doing something hard, like telling yourself, "This is making me better," you reinforce that action with a hit of dopamine. This rewires your motivation system to enjoy challenge, not just completion. The difference is huge. One creates dependency on outcomes, the other builds autonomy through process-based gratification. Let's move into visualization paired with physiology. A lot of people visualize success passively, lying on a couch, eyes closed, imagining a future version of themselves. That has some value, but when you combine visualization with elevated physical arousal, like just after a workout or cold exposure, you amplify neurochemical readiness. The brain is far more receptive to forming new associations when your body is in a heightened state. This is called synaptic tagging and capture. It's like stamping a mental file with urgency. Use this window to visualize your goals, and the brain encodes it more deeply. Now consider the role of novelty and curiosity in self-directed change. Novel stimuli, new books, new challenges, new social dynamics, trigger the release of acetylcholine and dopamine, which mark experiences as important and worth remembering. The more curious you are, the more you engage those systems, and the more you increase your capacity to update mental models. This is the opposite of stagnation. You're not just collecting knowledge, you're creating a neurochemical environment where transformation becomes easier, even exciting. In a very real sense, curiosity is a biological antidote to fear. Also crucial is language precision. Your brain interprets internal language as instruction. Phrases like "I can't," "I'm not good at," or "I always mess this up" are not neutral. They are neural commands. By shifting yourself, talk to "I'm working on," "I'm learning to," or "this is training," you create flexibility and reduce internal resistance. You're not faking positivity. You're crafting instructions that align with the adaptive nature of your brain. And finally, let's look at emotional tagging. When you experience something with emotional intensity, whether joy or pain, it becomes more deeply wired. Use this. Celebrate your wins, even micro wins, out loud. Let yourself feel the success. That emotion makes the memory stick, and the behavior behind it more likely to repeat. Emotion is not a distraction. It's a neurobiological highlighter. Use it wisely. Now let's explore the concept of identity-driven behavior, a core mechanism of long-term transformation. The brain doesn't just record what you do, it records who you believe you are when you do it. Every action, every routine, every choice is casting a vote for an internal identity. When you show up for your workout, even when you don't feel like it, your brain isn't just tracking physical effort, it's encoding the belief, "I'm someone who honors discipline." That belief becomes a reference point the next time you face resistance. Identity, then, isn't a fixed trait. It's the byproduct of accumulated evidence. This is why inconsistency feels so destabilizing. It's not just the lost progress. It's the crack in self-trust. That's the real cost of breaking promises to yourself. But the flip side is powerful. Every small act of follow-through, even in the face of discomfort, becomes a signal to the brain that your sense of self is stable and dependable, and a stable identity is what keeps motivation alive long after the novelty wears off. There's also a neurochemical reason why consistency beats intensity. The brain adapts best to repeated, moderate stimuli. A single massive effort, a 3-hour workout or a 10-hour work sprint might feel satisfying, but it doesn't create lasting circuitry. It's the daily, moderate, intentional actions that slowly carve new neural grooves. This is supported by long-term potentiation theory. The more frequently two neurons fire together, the stronger their connection becomes. In simple terms, repetition with presence builds wiring. Intensity without follow-through fades. Let's now turn to self-assessment and reflection. This isn't journaling for its own sake. This is about directed neuroplasticity. When you reflect on your day and identify what worked, what didn't, and what you'll do differently, you're activating the brain's executive networks. This strengthens your ability to predict outcomes, regulate behavior, and stay aligned with goals. But here's the key: your reflection must be framed around learning, not judgment. Self-criticism triggers stress responses that inhibit learning. Self-inquiry, by contrast, activates the growth circuitry. Ask, "What's the lesson here?" Not, "Why did I fail again?" Another underused brainwashing tool is auditory input, your daily sound environment. Music, tones, even the rhythm of your own voice has measurable effects on emotional state, attention, and memory formation. Fast-paced music increases alertness. Binaural beats in specific frequencies can enhance focus or calm, depending on the pattern. Even just speaking out your goals, your plans, your process, creates auditory feedback loops that reinforce intention. You're literally hearing your brain's plan out loud, anchoring it into memory, And let's not ignore the role of delayed gratification, one of the strongest predictors of long-term success across studies is the ability to hold out for a bigger reward later. This skill isn't about willpower, it's about strategy. Break large goals into tangible milestones. Celebrate progress incrementally. Give your brain frequent, earned dopamine hits, not random bursts from scrolling or sugar. In doing so, you're teaching your reward system that the pursuit of growth itself is the most satisfying outcome. This doesn't just keep you on track, it rewires what you crave at the deepest level. Let's go further into how the nervous system encodes mastery. There's a concept in neuroscience called error-driven learning. It means your brain learns not just from doing things right, but from recognizing what went wrong and adjusting in real time. This feedback loop relies on a chemical called norepinephrine, a signal of alertness that tells your brain, pay attention, something needs to change. The most effective way to leverage this: approach mistakes as data. When you make an error and reflect without shame, but with focus, you enhance learning. The key is combining high error awareness with low emotional reactivity. That's the zone where skill and self-control grow together. This ties into another principle: deliberate practice versus rote repetition. Simply doing something over and over again does not guarantee improvement. What does is deliberate focus on the edge of your ability, the zone where things are difficult but not impossible. This zone triggers neuroplastic engagement. You're forcing the brain to recruit new circuits, strengthen synapses, and optimize performance under tension. Over time, the skill that once felt like a struggle becomes automatic. That's not magic, that's myelin and circuitry, but it requires discomfort, and that discomfort is the sign that your brain is doing the work. Let's also address the role of posture and physical orientation in shaping brain state. Research shows that the way you position your body directly affects the activation of brain regions linked to alertness, confidence, and memory. Sitting upright, not rigidly, but alert, improves blood flow to the prefrontal cortex and enhances working memory. Even eye position can influence your thinking. Looking up slightly tends to promote abstract thought and creativity. Looking down tends to trigger introspection and self-evaluation. This means you can use your body as a lever, adjusting your physiology to shift your cognition. Another overlooked tool is micro-goal anchoring. The brain often shuts down when faced with vague or distant outcomes. Get healthy or be successful is not a command the brain can act on. Instead, you need clear, visually and emotionally specific tasks. Things like drink 500 ml of water after waking, or write for 25 focused minutes. These micro-goals bypass mental resistance and deliver small but potent hits of dopamine. The more you succeed at them, the more your brain begins to seek them out. It's behavioral momentum built on clarity. We also need to talk about visual cues in your environment. What your eyes land on repeatedly begins to influence your subconscious. If your workspace is filled with clutter, distraction, or visual reminders of failure, your brain encodes that chaos. By contrast, even a simple cue, like a notebook, a water bottle, a pair of running shoes in the doorway, in prime behavior. These cues don't just remind you of a task, they signal an identity. This is what I do. This is who I am. Over time, the environment becomes part of the system that holds your desired behavior in place. All of this underscores one truth: you don't need radical change to rewire your brain. You need consistent cues, aligned actions, and regular reflection. Day by day, repetition becomes identity, identity becomes instinct, and instinct becomes freedom. Let's examine another layer of self-directed transformation: circadian alignment. Your brain and body operate on a 24-hour rhythm that governs everything from mood to metabolism to cognitive performance. When you align your behaviors with this internal clock, by getting bright light in the morning, eating meals at consistent times, winding down before bed, you support the release of hormones like cortisol and melatonin at their optimal levels. That balance creates clarity, focus, and sustained energy. But when your circadian system is disrupted, late night scrolling, irregular meals, chaotic sleep, you send the brain into disarray. Fatigue increases, emotional control weakens, and your ability to make sound decisions degrades. The most powerful brainwashing protocol you can follow starts with anchoring your light, movement, and food cycles to the natural rhythm of the day. Now let's zoom into mental load. In today's world, your brain is processing thousands of micro decisions, notifications, and interruptions. Each one might seem small, but collectively they deplete your prefrontal bandwidth, the fuel for focus, impulse control, and planning. This is why simplification is such a powerful strategy. Reduce the number of choices you make daily about what to wear, what to eat, when to work out. Create defaults, automate low-level tasks. Every decision you don't have to make is cognitive fuel saved for the things that matter. It's not about being rigid, it's about creating structure that supports creativity, not competes with it. Another high-leverage tool is state shifting through physical anchors. The brain is constantly scanning your internal and external environment to decide, should I be alert, relaxed, defensive, or open? You can train it to shift gears quickly by building what's called state associations. For example, you could use a specific scent, song, or breathing pattern to prime focus, or use a cold splash of water, a walk, or tactile pressure to down-regulate stress. These anchors become fast-access portals to a new mindset. With repetition, your brain links these cues to new states, making it easier to shift on demand. And consider the role of failure as neural feedback. When you fall short of a habit or goal, your response determines what the brain learns. If you meet failure with frustration or shame, the brain associates change with punishment, and resistance grows. But if you meet failure with curiosity, the brain opens a window for learning. Ask, what was missing? What's the adjustment? What can I test next? This mindset, rooted in adaptive learning, is what keeps people growing instead of stalling. It's not just resilience, it's circuit-level reinforcement of progress under pressure. Let's not overlook the concept of future self-continuity. The more connected you feel to the person you want to become, the more likely you are to act in alignment with that version of you. Visualization helps, but even more effective is bridging the gap with behavior. Do one thing today that your future self will thank you for. When that action is repeated, your brain starts recognizing your future self not as an abstract fantasy, but as a real identity already in motion. That's when change speeds up, when the person you're becoming starts feeling familiar. What you're doing through all of this is sculpting the conditions for long-term neurobehavioral adaptation. You're not waiting for motivation. You're training your brain to generate it. Now, let's delve into emotional granularity, a subtle but powerful form of brain training. Most people label their emotional states in broad, vague terms. I'm stressed, I'm fine, I feel off. But the brain responds very differently when you name emotions with precision. If you can distinguish between frustration, anxiety, overwhelm, boredom, or guilt, you gain clarity. That clarity activates the prefrontal cortex and calms the limbic system. You're no longer flooded, you're observing. The more precise your emotional vocabulary, the more control you have over your internal state. This is emotional self-regulation as a neurological skill, not just a psychological idea. Now look at interoception, your ability to perceive internal bodily signals. It's the foundation of self-awareness and behavioral change. People who can sense their heart rate, their breath depth, or subtle changes in tension are far more effective at self-regulation. When you learn to listen to your body with accuracy, not reactively, but attentively, you begin to predict and shift your state before it spirals. Practices like breathwork, somatic scanning, or even focused physical exercise enhance interoceptive accuracy. Over time, you'll notice emotions rising earlier, feel fatigue before burnout, and respond to stress before it takes over. Consider relational neuroscience. Your brain doesn't operate in isolation. It's built to co-regulate with others. The tone of someone's voice, their facial expression, Even their posture can impact your nervous system in milliseconds. This is why environment and community matter. If you're surrounded by people who reinforce helplessness, chaos, or distraction, your brain internalizes that baseline. But when you're around those who model clarity, calm, and purpose, you begin to mirror those traits. This is not motivation. It's limbic resonance, a biologically hardwired phenomenon. Choose your emotional ecosystems wisely. They are sculpting your identity, often faster than your own internal efforts. Let's also examine default behavior loops. These are the automatic, often unconscious sequences your brain runs in response to triggers. Wake up, check, phone, scroll, delay tasks. These loops feel hard to break because they're neurologically efficient. They cost less energy to repeat than to redesign. But here's the leverage: the trigger is your access point. If you identify the cue, you can insert a new action. Wake up, light exposure, hydration, 5 deep breaths. The key is not breaking the habit, but replacing the behavior that follows the cue. That's how rewiring starts, not with willpower, but with architecture. Now, understand the role of urgency versus importance in brain training. The modern brain is flooded with urgent stimuli, emails, alerts, short deadlines, but urgency isn't the same as importance. If your brain is constantly reacting to the urgent, it never gets space to focus on the important. The deep work, the health routines, the identity shifts. Train your brain to tolerate delayed urgency. Block time, ignore non-critical input, create mental space for important actions that lack immediate payoff. That's how you build a brain oriented toward legacy, not just survival. What you're doing through all of this is reprogramming your perception of reality. You're shifting your baseline from reactivity to design, from confusion to clarity. And that shift, maintained over time, becomes the foundation of both a healthy and a successful life. So, here's the truth: your brain is always being shaped by your habits, your focus, your environment, your emotions. The question isn't if you're being brainwashed. The question is, by what? You can let default settings, distractions, and outdated beliefs carve your neural architecture, or you can take charge. You can become the architect, rewire your inputs, redesign your identity, replace reaction with reflection. Because when you deliberately train your brain, when you brainwash yourself on your own terms, you don't just change what you do, you change what you want to do. And that's the key to long-term health, fulfillment, and success. Make it your practice, make it your protocol, make it your identity, because the most powerful transformation isn't sudden, it's systematic. It's built brick by brick, belief by belief, behavior by behavior. And it starts now.